than chapter 6, okay, where we will be dealing almost exclusively, okay, with ancient Greece and some of the effects that Greek culture and society begin to have on other areas. Now, this is a term that will come up, and yes, you will need to know it, okay? Hellenism, all right? Basically, the mixing of Greek culture with other cultures, okay? Now, Greek culture is going to spread and influence a lot of areas because of this, okay? Now, where are we, okay? We're in the middle of a conflict known as the Peloponnesian War, okay? And if you recall from our previous chapter and even a little bit before, over 150 Greek city-states, they're not united. The only time they ever united for anything up until this point is when they were fighting against the Persians. But now they are back to their old habits of fighting each other. Specifically, the two main city-states that we're looking at, Athens and Sparta. Okay, and of course, some cities are allies with Athens, some cities are allies with Sparta. Okay, this war goes on for a number of years, and anytime there appears to be like some kind of negotiation or chance for peace, it doesn't happen because unknown to most of the Greeks is that the Persians are kind of manipulating things behind the scenes because they haven't forgotten. All right, that they were defeated, and they had to not only give up invading Greece, but all of those cities that were in modern day Turkey. And so by weakening the Greek city-states, they're like, okay, we can reconquer Ionia, that part of Turkey that is Greek, and of course we can conquer all of Greece. Okay, now to the north of Greece is a land called Macedonia. All right. Now, they are also Greeks, but the Greeks, the mainland Greeks, the ones from Athens and Sparta and all, Macedonians are like the nerd Greeks, the dorks, the rednecks. Okay, they're uneducated, they're unrefined. I mean, they're like, your, no offense, your cousins in Alabama, all right? It's like they really don't look highly on them. They look at them as uncultured and uncivilized, okay? Now, they too share a lot of things with the mainland Greeks, namely, number one, language, okay? What was the other thing that all the Greeks shared? Religion, yeah. They believe in the same gods. They do like all of the stuff. So other than being a little less cultured, okay, they're not doing, the philosophy. They don't have theater. They don't. Other than that, okay, they're really no different from the other Greeks. And in fact, even the Macedonians are separate. Because they have different city-states, they're not, 100% united. Okay? Now, during the Peloponnesian War, okay, while the main Greeks are fighting each other, okay, a man named Philip II, okay, he basically does what the Greeks haven't done in that he brings Macedonia under his control. Okay, so he unites Macedonia, and then he conquers a couple of other areas, like to the north and to the east. And so, Philip builds himself a pretty, decent-sized kingdom. Okay? Now, once again, Greek city-states fighting each other. Every time it appears that one is going to win or the other is going to do whatever, okay, Persians interfere. And so finally, the Greek city-states basically say, hey, we've been literally killing each other for several years now. We just found out that it's the Persians that have been kind of manipulating things, and so we're really pissed off at the Persians, but, first we need to put an end to this war. And of course, Athens is like, first we got to get rid of Sparta, and then we can take care of the Persians. And of course, Sparta's like, well, first we got to get rid of Athens, and then we need to take care of the Persians. All right? And basically, Philip's like telling them both, yeah, I'll help you out. But what does Philip do? Of course, he comes to Greece and he conquers all of the city-states. Okay? They're too weak to resist them because they've been fighting each other for so many years. Okay? Number one. Number two, even though the Greeks have a pretty good military, especially the Spartans, and one of the things in the last chapter, okay, the Greeks invented something known as the phalanx, which is a system of fighting where you have, soldiers lined up in several columns, and it's almost like a square. You have shields, you have spears, and so you're basically like a porcupine armadillo. All right, you've got the shields to block any arrows or spears, and of course you've got your spears so you can poke at people. All right. Well, Philip has the same thing, except he actually makes some slight modifications to it so that it's more powerful than the average Greek phalanx. Okay, number one. Number two, for the first time, now it's not to say that people haven't fought on horseback before, but for the first time, Philip basically is like, okay, yeah, there's people that have fought on horse, but why don't we put armor on the horse riders, and why don't we put armor on the horses also? Okay, because one of the things, yeah, you're pretty much exposed, and even if you're faster, someone gets a lucky shot, kills your horse, whatever, okay? And so, yeah, this actually gives Macedonia the advantage. The other thing, okay, and this you can even apply today, don't let anyone ever trick you or fool you or any politician lie to you. All wars cost money, okay? All of them, all right? Without money, you can't fight a war, okay? Macedonia had just literally dozens of gold mines. Okay, Philip discovered these as he was conquering various areas. And so he had basically, not really, but what appeared to be an almost limitless source of gold. Okay, so he could, hire more soldiers. He could, finance this war, whereas the Greeks had spent, almost 10 years fighting each other. So not only were they tired of war, they were basically out of money too. Okay? So that eventually, Athens is the last city to hold out. Eventually, they are conquered. Okay? So now, Philip controls all of Greece and all of Macedonia. And literally, for the first time in history, Greek is united under one government.
This might be a weird question, but what happens after, a city-state is conquered? What happens to the people who are in charge?
Usually, they are either taken as slaves, okay, or a couple of them are executed, as an example. All right, so that, okay, hey, we just killed your king, don't rebel, all right, or else, basically you're going to have the same thing done. Okay, now, unfortunately, Philip doesn't get to enjoy being king of all of this for very long, because not long after, okay, life goes on. One of his daughters is getting married, okay? She's getting married, and so, Philip has this huge wedding, and at his daughter's wedding, he's literally stabbed in the back, okay? He is assassinated there, so, always makes for, a memorable time when the father of the bride gets killed. Okay, and so his son, his eldest son, Alexander, who is only 14 years old, actually takes over. Okay, now this is kind of unusual because normally, 18 is that magic number, but Alex is, only I can call it Alex, you guys can't. All right, Alex is special. All right, and so he then becomes the king of Macedonia. All right. 14. when he took over.
And who stabbed him?
One of his bodyguards. One of the mysteries of history. There's lots of theories. Okay, he was jealous. He wanted more power. Some people think he was hired by the Persians to do it, because one of his plans was, after conquering Greece, was to conquer Persia. So obviously the Persians were like, well, if we can take him out now, all right, you know, that'll keep him from conquering us, type of thing. So, but once again, you know, nobody left behind a diary like, I killed him.
Wasn't Alexander one of Plato's students?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, no, Aristotle. I was just like, wait, I gotta remember my chart. Yes, Aristotle. Okay. Now we'll get to that in a minute. All right. But yes, those of you that were here early knew I was getting some videos prepped. A little bit about, first off, Philip, and hopefully that works. Okay, a little bit about Philip and this thing, the phalanx, and how he actually improved on it and why it was better. So.
The pillar of Philip's military strategy, cavalry and infantry. And the pillar of his infantry was a formation called the phalanx, a rectangle group of foot soldiers that traveled very lightly at a marching speed few other armies could equal.
The phalanx had been a part of Greek warfare for hundreds of years. Now Philip would infuse it with a weapon never before seen on the battlefield.
I am so sorry. I know, I love Taylor too, but there we go.
The innovation that Philip did was changing the shape of the phalanx and introducing this long weapon called the sarissa. So the phalanx became like a huge tank.
The sarissa was a nearly 18-foot-long spear that could devastate an enemy before its soldiers could use their swords or shorter spears in a counterattack.
Basically, you plant the head of your pike against the guy and push him back. And the effect is a little bit like, you know, when a kid tries to attack him and you put your hand on the kid's forehead and his little fists are swinging like this, but they can't reach you. That's what the pike enables Philip's infantry to do.
Okay.
Well,
So, the change, and I apologize. Wish I was a little bit taller. All right. So number one, what Philip does is he actually divides these, because the Greeks had it as like one just giant, bless you again, one giant thing. And so Philip divides them so that they're a bit more mobile, okay? And then, of course, the other thing, and you don't need to know the name of the sarissa, okay? The standard spear, was 10 feet, okay? What does Philip give his soldiers? How long is it? Oh, didn't catch that? 18. Okay, so a much longer spear, okay? And like the one comment, before you even get near, you've already been stabbed before you even have a chance of coming up against the Macedonian armies, okay? Huh? Yes, so that's why he said you would like literally like rest it on the guy in front of you. Okay. Now, the guys that were in front, they had to be like totally ripped, you know, like you know, some of these guys here, like just jacked. All right. Do you guys still call it jack? I don't know. Okay. You guys are jack. I know. All right. You know, swole. All right. They were working out. They were doing. But then the guys in the back, yeah, I could just, you know, lay my spear on your shoulder and, you know, kind of like, okay, you know, type of thing. So yeah. But no, yes, they were extremely heavy. Okay? This is probably the most famous image that we have of Alexander. It's from a mosaic that was drawn afterwards. I mean, obviously back then there's no, you know, cameras. The you know, painting techniques aren't quite as refined as we see, you know, later in the Middle Ages. But yeah, okay, so we can kind of assume that this is basically what he looked like. Okay, type of thing. All right. Now, as soon as Alexander takes over, and this kind of goes to Tori's question, okay, or Tori's comment. Once Alexander is like officially crowned king, he decides to invade Persia. Okay. Now, like I said, number one, Philip had already planned on invading Persia. Okay, it was already part of his strategy. And so basically, Alexander was just going to, finish off Dad's mission. All right. And then, of course, the one thing here, because of this, the rumors that the Persians were actually responsible for Philip's death, that they paid off the guard to, assassinate Philip. Well, obviously, someone kills your dad, you go after them for revenge. Okay. Probably, though, the most likely reason is that the Persians had attacked an area known as Thrace, and Thrace was an area that had been conquered by the Macedonians. So it's kind of like, well, the Persians attacked us first, okay, so we're going to retaliate, okay? Probably the least credible reason why was his mom. Okay, and people are like, what? His mom had a lot of influence over Alexander. Now, this isn't in your textbook per se, but Philip had like a lot of side pieces, all right? And so he had children by a lot of these women. And so even though technically they weren't entitled to be, the next king, she still wanted to protect Alexander from all of these things. And so she basically felt that if Alexander attacked Persia, he could, assign his half-brothers as generals. And if they died in battle, oh my goodness, they're heroes to Macedonia. Oh, and by the way, you get rid of anyone who could ever challenge your claim to the throne. All right? There was actually a movie made, I want to say almost around the same time as 300, called Alexander, where Angelina Jolie plays Alexander's mom. Unfortunately, the director took it in a very ick direction, implying that mom and son were, you've seen it? Yeah, okay. And that...
To the Future stuff?
Yeah, well, except that it was, intentional, and, Alex was into it, Mom was into it. For those of you that don't get what we're talking, incestuous relationship between mother and son. Okay, I don't think that's true. Like I said, there's very little proof for that, but the director of this movie decided this is the direction I'm going to take it, which is why you should never base all your historical knowledge from Hollywood films. Okay, now, yes. He was extremely educated. Aristotle had been his private tutor growing up. Okay, remember, he's one of the famous Greek philosophers. He's the one about collect evidence, deductive reasoning, come up with a conclusion, etc. Okay, and in addition to that, it just so happened that he was actually really, really good at fighting. He was a pretty good warrior. He was a brilliant tactician. He could think 3 steps ahead. And so every time the Persians, came up against him, he never lost against the Persians. He defeated them everywhere. Okay? And so pretty quick, remember Anatolia, that's modern-day Turkey, Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, and then headed south into Egypt. Within the first year of becoming king, Alexander conquered all of these lands. Okay, so he was good. All right, literally one of history's best generals. And so here's Macedonia. Okay, here's Greece. So basically, he conquered all of this, conquered part of that, and then of course south into Egypt. Okay, eventually his empire reaches way out here, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right. Just an illustration of the video I showed you, okay, what the Macedonian phalanx looked like. And I know my drawings are, horrible. But in this case, the other thing, Philip had them separate, whereas the typical Greek phalanx was just like one giant line, so that this way this was a little bit more mobile. All right, they could move around a little bit more independently, and even though it's not in the picture, add to that armored horses and armored, warriors on horseback. All right, that would also cause quite a bit of damage. Okay, now, like I said, okay, Alexander, military genius. Okay, once he conquered Egypt, like he's basically controlled everything, like west of the Tigris and the Euphrates, he decided, okay, now we're going into actual Persia. Okay, I don't remember if it's in your textbook. I think it is. At this point, the Persians were like, you can have everything that's west of the Tigris River. And he's like, no, why? I took that without any problems. I'll probably take your ass everywhere else too. So why would I just settle for this when I can have everything? Eventually, he conquers all of Persia. Okay, he makes it through all of Persia. He gets to what today would be modern day Afghanistan. This is like no longer even in Persia, like he's taken all of that, so he's just going. All right, why not? Nobody's been able to stop me. He eventually makes it to the Indus River. Okay, on the other side is, of course, India. When he crosses it, okay, he's met with an Indian army. And they're hoping to scare Alexander and defeat him by using elephants. Okay, no Greek has seen elephants before. All right, and so suddenly it's these giant, gray creatures with ridiculous noses, and there's people riding them and whatnot. Alexander's strategy: he sent his cavalry behind the elephants and attacked them from behind. All right, and it's like, okay, so he defeats them, okay? And he actually makes it a good way into India before his men finally say, okay, Alex, like, how much more are we going to keep going? Alexander wanted to go to the end of the world, he said. All right, he wanted to conquer everything. His men are tired. They're like, we're done, okay? By this point in time, and I know, we went through it quickly, it's been 10 years, all right, since they've been at war. 10 years since his soldiers last saw Macedonia. 10 years that they've been away from their families and everything they know, okay? So they're like, no, we're done. That's it. We don't want to do this anymore, okay? Without an army, obviously, Alexander can't keep conquering. So he actually turns around and goes back, okay? But, all right, he takes his time, number one, and because they have been in Persia for so long, one of the things that begins to happen is Alexander falls in love with Persian culture, okay? He thinks it's amazing. He thinks it's awesome, okay? And so, bless you, as they're marching through Persia on their way to conquer, and then as they're marching back, okay, he little by little begins to adopt Persian customs. He begins to get rid of his Greek clothing, and he starts dressing Persian, okay? One of the things that he really likes is the Persian tradition of being able to have more than one wife. So he begins to marry several Persian women, okay? Does anyone remember what the only qualifier was for men if you wanted to have more than one wife? Ooh. You had to be able to provide for them all at an equal, because in some cultures, you have wife number one, and wife number one gets everything, but then wife number two, gets like only like a halfway, medium house, and then, Maddie, wife number three, gets nothing, because it's all been given to the first two. Wife number, don't even get me started, wife number four gets less than nothing. Okay, so but in Persian culture, the men had to be able to prove that each wife would have the same amount, the same luxuries, the same whatever. Okay, whether it was like a lot, like all of them had a lot, or like all of them had nothing, but they were all at the same level. Okay, Alexander's the king. Are his wives going to have a lot? Are they all going to be pretty much equal? Oh yeah. So he's just like, okay, like you know, like just basically, he married like close to 50 to 60 women. We're not 100% sure. I know, right? Hey, it's not as bad as Solomon, like 700. Okay, that's like a lot. All right, 50, 60 compared to Solomon, you know, gotta get better numbers, okay? Now, the other thing that Alexander did, and this was kind of a devious thing on his part, because he still wanted to go and conquer more. And he's literally taking his time going from where they are to get back to Greece, okay? He encourages his men, his soldiers, to marry Persian women, okay? Not only because he thinks they're like, you know, the hottest thing ever, but if they marry Persian women, then they're going to want to settle down in Persia, okay? And by doing that, hey, that's closer to like where we're going to keep going to war type of thing, okay? So we don't have to go all the way back to Greece now. We can settle down here and then keep attacking, okay? And so one of the other things that Alexander does to kind of leave his mark on things, okay, and because his men missed Greece, okay, he basically builds Greek cities wherever he goes, okay? Of course, most of them are named Alexandria, okay, because I built them, all right? So, you know, the most famous one is in Egypt, okay? Unfortunately, it sank into the ocean, but that's the most famous one. But there were other cities throughout Persia and throughout Egypt and throughout all of the areas that he conquered named Alexandria. And when archaeologists first find these, like they're traveling through the middle of Afghanistan, and suddenly they find the ruins of a Greek city. And they're like, how did a Greek city get into the middle of Afghanistan? Well, Alexander had it built. Okay, and so that way, you know, hey soldier, you missed Greece so much, why don't we just recreate it here? Okay, or at least try to, and you can live there with your Persian wife.
That's really sad because they had family
Yeah.
in Greece, so they left their first wife and their kids.
Yeah. Oh, but remember, we're kind of Persian now, so you can have more than one wife. So it's all good, Mahalia. It's all good. All right. Now, just to show one more clip about Alexander's strategy. Where are you? Oh, no, 14. Let me see. Hold on. It's 15. Sorry, I promise I'll get it right here. Okay? And in the meantime, yeah, I am not paying for premium or whatever it's called.
To bring the battlefield to the city, where Alexander could fight the Tyrians face to face. Tyre would be an island no more.
Okay, let me just back this up really quick.
What if the enemy refused to come out and fight you?
The answer was short and to the point. They killed Alexander's ambassadors and threw their
So
bodies
he's trying to conquer a city that's on an island.
The stakes were high. If Alexander failed to take the city, it would send a message to the world he wasn't invincible. With Tyre protected from his land forces by the sea, it was up to his engineers to bring the battlefield to the city, where Alexander could fight the Tyrians face to face. Tyre would be an island no more.
What if the enemy refused to come out and fight you? Alexander realized that he could not allow his military operations to get bogged down in the face of fortifications, and that meant that he needed techniques and weaponry that could attack fortifications.
With mammoth walls and a fortified harbor, and very little land around the walls, the city of Tyre was long thought to be impregnable. Thus, Alexander resolved to a very, very ambitious approach. He knew he couldn't take the city unless he did damage to the walls. So he had his engineers build a causeway, a bridge from the mainland to the island. Causeway was about half-mile long, 200 feet wide, 20 feet high. When the causeway was within striking distance, Alexander unleashed a hail of terror on the city, and then he deployed the only weapon he knew would end the battle, a siege tower.
This is what he had built.
A multi-storied armored car that moved forward on wheels. Outside, they were fireproofed with rawhide, covering the entire wooden structure. Inside, a central staircase led to a series of platforms where Axabeles and other catapults launched missiles onto Tyre's walls. Down below, others used the tower as protection to wield a ground-level battery ram.
They literally wheeled them up to the wall. The men inside would be protected, and they would be shooting arrows at the defenders on the wall and trying to cross over onto the wall and to kill the defenders.
Alexander's siege towers pummeled the walls of Tyre for days. Once the fortress had been breached, Alexander went for the jugular. He unleashed a firestorm of reprisal upon the city that had resisted him.
The assault itself would really be a terrifying experience for everyone involved. The only way to signal would be through trumpets. So you have to imagine trumpets blaring, a tremendous noise of men attacking, flags blowing in the wind on the battlements of the city that was under attack. I think it would have been an extraordinary scene.
Alexander resumed his trek southward through Palestine.
All right, so even cities that were considered unbeatable, impregnable, Alexander was able to do it. And so, like I said, he had his engineers construct these siege towers. The other thing they mention, and it's actually in the video, and I skipped over it, Oxybelus. The Macedonians invented this, where it's one of those like giant crossbow type of things, and you wind it up, you know, by pulling the levers, and so it shot these humongous, I want to say arrows, I know that's not the right word. The documentary calls them missiles, at the walls of the city. Okay, so yeah. And of course, once he was able to get in, no mercy, because this will send a message to the other cities that if they resist, the same thing will happen to them. Okay, now, conquered parts of India, men refused to go further, turning around, slowly going back. He stops in Babylon in 323. Okay, he's only 32 years old, and this is where he dies. He doesn't die in battle, all right? The only thing that we have in the historical records is someone making a note that he had a fever, he caught a fever, and then a few days later, he was dead, and that's it, okay? There are also here, like, literally dozens of theories as to what happened, okay? Some people say that he was poisoned by his own troops because they found out of his, you know, secret plans to, you know, this is why he wants us to marry Persian women, this is why he's building Greek cities in random places, like, you know, he's trying to get us to kind of feel safe and at home so that we can keep on conquering. Some people think it was one of his many wives who became displeased with him, okay, type of thing. Once again, it could have just been, you know, just a regular food poisoning or whatever. Nobody really knows, okay? But we end up with some issues, okay? He hasn't designated an heir, okay? So who's going to be the next king? Okay, yes, we know oldest son is the one who gets it, but he's got, you know, dozens of wives, and each of them have had, I mean, which son out of all of these is going to be it? And so basically, the empire falls apart, okay? Eventually, okay, people stop supporting any claim that Alexander's children might have, and the generals, the various people who led his armies, begin to fight amongst themselves, okay? This lasts for several years, okay? But eventually, 3 generals come out on top, and Alexander's conquests then are separated into 3 different kingdoms, okay? you only vaguely have to know these. There's only one that I need you to know specifically. The first one, it becomes known as the Seleucid Empire. We call it that because Alexander's general, a man named Seleucus, is the one who takes it over. Okay, it's basically most of Persia. All right, from Syria to Afghanistan. So what used to be the Persian Empire is now the Seleucid Empire. Okay, Macedonia, the homeland. Okay, and when I say Macedonia, this also includes, mainland Greece and Thrace and a couple of areas around Greece. Okay, those are taken over by his general Antigonus. All right, the one that I do need you to remember, okay, is Egypt. All right. Now, when I say Egypt, it's not just Egypt, but some of the lands in North Africa, and then some of the land that would today be considered Palestine. Okay. It is taken over by his general Ptolemy. The P is silent, like it is in most Greek words. This is Cleopatra's family. Okay. And even though they didn't have a family name, we call them the Ptolemies. The Ptolemies ruled Egypt from this point in time until Cleopatra comes around. Okay, so she's like the great granddaughter of this guy. Okay, so after this point, so people are like, yeah, Cleopatra was like the most beautiful woman ever in history. Blah blah blah. Mahalia's like, no, she was. Well,
she was, but not in the way you think.
Yeah, I was just gonna say she wasn't like, no offense if anyone hears Egypt, she wasn't strictly Egyptian. She was like Greek. She was Greek Egyptian type of thing. Okay, so you throw in a little Greek blood in there. Okay, so yes, all right. So this is the one I need you to remember. Egypt was ruled over by Ptolemy, and that is Cleopatra's family. The other ones, like I said. Just be aware that, okay, the empire was divided into three. So Antigonus, Macedonia, and then, of course, the little blue areas were the parts that he ruled. The pink area, that is the Seleucid Empire. And then, I never know what to call this, brown, orange. That is ruled over by Ptolemy, okay? Now, some of you are like, but Santos, wait, it was bigger, wasn't it? Because he actually reached all the way over here and up there. Yes, but remember, we've had several years of civil war, and so some of those areas broke off. The Indians took some of the land back that Alex had taken. We see an independent kingdom develop, and then, of course, some of these other areas, they just went off on their own, and the remaining generals weren't strong enough to maintain them. Okay? Okay. Now, once again, all right, looking at Egypt, all right, and I think I already told you this, okay? Yes, I did. This is why I want you to remember it, because the Ptolemies, or Ptolemy's family, they maintain their rule over Egypt. They last the longest, and it isn't until the Romans come in and defeat Cleopatra and Mark Antony that, finally Egypt falls, okay? Now, the other reason why this is important is because this is where it happened first, okay? Once again, that word Hellenism that I started off with, okay? We begin to see, little by little, Egyptian culture begin to merge with Greek culture, okay? Because now you have Greek leaders, okay? Under Ptolemy, all of Egypt was brought together, okay? Remember that Alexander built several cities, several Greek cities, named them all after himself. All right. Alexandria, then, the biggest one that he built in Egypt, becomes the capital. All right. It eventually sinks into the ocean during a tidal wave, tsunami type of thing. But before that, Alexandria, and we'll talk about it a little bit, was a huge center of learning, and it had one of the largest libraries in the ancient world. Remember, the Egyptians didn't write on tablets, they wrote on papyrus. Well, by this point in time, most cultures were writing on paper. And what does fire do to paper? There's a huge fire and it burns all the documents, and then later, as they're trying to restore things, there's like an earthquake, tsunami, city falls into the ocean. So yeah. I mean, there is now a city called Alexandria, but it's like a little bit farther inland. And so yes, I suppose if you pay, you can go scuba diving in the bay and see the old city, the one that fell into the ocean, and stuff like that. Okay? Now, I wrote up here Rosetta Stone because it was Ptolemy's grandson, Ptolemy III, because of this Greek influence, we actually can look at hieroglyphics and hieratic writing and all of the other type of Egyptian stuff and actually know what it's saying, okay? Because unlike the Mesopotamians, like other cultures didn't conquer and then adopt their writing because they didn't have a writing system, okay? The Egyptians had a very unique writing system, and when the Greeks came in, basically what Ptolemy III did was, I want everyone to be able to read this stuff. And so on the Rosetta Stone, you have part of it in hieroglyphic, part of it in hieratic, and then of course, Greek, okay? Fast forward a couple thousand years, people discover the pyramids, people discover all of these things, and they're like, ooh, nice pictures, but what the hell does it all mean, okay? And nobody knows. All right, well, 1799, Napoleon conquers Egypt. Take history 2 to learn all about that. He discovers this big rock with Greek letters and then a bunch of drawings. Nobody's really sure what it is until scholars look at it and finally they're like, this is a translation. This is like a guide. And so they're able to, decipher all of the Egyptian writing. Well, if it hadn't been for this Greek family doing this, today we just look at those pyramids and be like, hey, nice pictures. All right, we wouldn't be able to translate this stuff. Okay, let's get to the important stuff. Under this family, in addition, we also see, and I'll talk about some of the other things in a minute, how various Egyptian religious things become Greekified. Okay, remember when it comes to Greek religion, all right, how did they portray their gods? What did they look like? They were human, yes. And so little by little, the Egyptian deities go from, half man, half bull, human body, but the head of a horse or the head of whatever, into a more Greek-like appearance. Okay? And here's the ew kind of part as well. Eventually, this is one of the things that the Ptolemies adopt from the Egyptians, because the Egyptian pharaohs did this. Okay, in order to keep the bloodline pure and in order to prevent other families from ruling, family members married family members. Okay, now, before you make that face, all right, European families, they married each other's cousins, all right, but the old Egyptians and the Greeks took it one step further and sometimes married siblings, all right, brother married sister, sister married brother. All right, type out. So I know some of you are like, yes, it is kind of ew, all right. But that way, they're like, hey, we keep these other families from wanting to take over, and we keep our bloodline pure, okay. When it came to the Egyptians, because remember, the pharaoh was descended from who? Or pharaohs were part what? God, yeah, they were descended from the sun god. So why would we allow a puny mortal to mix with this god lineage? Okay, sun god, all right? And so the Ptolemies adopt that same attitude, okay? Now, of course, as I mentioned, there are other minor kingdoms that spring up, but the three big ones, those are the ones that dominate most of history, and of course, eventually absorb the rest of them, okay? We'll finish off with this, because once again, you do need to know this, all right? Hellenism. at its most basic, and it starts with Alexander going out there and building Greek cities in just random places. Okay? At its most basic, the spread of Greek culture. Okay? But, obviously, you can't spread just Greek culture and expect it to dominate over the local stuff. And so little by little, as we see with Egypt, okay, and Egypt is probably the one that does it the most, which is why it's the one we're going to remember, Ptolemy, okay? We see then Greek culture mixing with local cultures, okay? And so little by little, all right, these areas begin to adopt their own version of Greek art and Greek theater and Greek philosophy and Greek learning, most especially the Greek language. Okay? Now, I put all of this here just so that you know, yes, all of the Greeks knew the earth was round and that, you know, it wasn't the center of the universe thousands of years before other groups. Okay? Well, Greeks pass on that knowledge, and so local people, now they begin to adopt that and be like, hey, you know, our scientists, our mathematicians had certain things figured out, but now with this Greek knowledge, it all makes sense, okay? That it's because the earth isn't, you know, just sitting still and everything goes around it, but the earth is going around something else, okay? Like I said, philosophy and art, we begin to see how other cultures, especially Egyptian, begin to portray their gods as more human-like. Many of these areas adopt Greek architecture in their buildings, and of course, Greek theater to showcase different dramas. Probably the biggest thing, okay? In all of these areas, yes, people still speak their native languages, but if you want to be part of government, if you want to be part of education, if you want to be part of culture, theater, music, art, you have to speak Greek, okay? And so for the next 1,000 years, almost up until the Middle Ages, okay, you aren't considered educated unless you can speak Greek, okay? Most of the important documents, okay, are written in Greek, okay? For those of you who are Christian, the entire New Testament was written in Greek, okay? Not Hebrew, not Aramaic, definitely not English, okay? It was written in Greek, okay? And so, like I said, it isn't until Latin replaces it, and even then, for hundreds of years after that, you know, okay, you can either study Latin or Greek type of thing. So Greek becomes that important. Okay, in this case, we begin to see then the mixing of all of these cultures and all of these ideas so that we actually come up with a word called cosmopolitan. And I'm not talking about the drink, all right? But when you describe a city as cosmopolitan or a person as cosmopolitan, in this case, it comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means universe, and the Greek word polis, which I hope all of you got right, which means city. So in this case, a universal city, or a city where everything in the universe exists, okay? New York is a cosmopolitan city, okay? Because you could go have, you know, a Greek breakfast, you could have Mexican lunch, and then you can have like Indian dinner, probably all within the same block, or at very least in Brooklyn. You know, you can go and you can find out. Some of you are smiling because you know it's true. All right, you know, you can, yeah, yes, okay. And so in this case, the word springs up to describe Alexandria, okay. It is a mix of Egyptian and Greek, all right, but people from everywhere come, and so that eventually it's more than just Egyptian Greek, all right? Alexandria becomes a city that encompasses everything, all right? And as I mentioned, outside of language and education, probably the biggest thing that affects these areas now is Greek theater. Okay? People begin to adopt Greek dramas, Greek plays. People begin to take their own stories and begin to retell them in the Greek style. Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about how Greek theater affects drama for thousands of years afterwards. But it was the Greeks that invented the 3-act play, introduction, conflict, resolution. Okay? Before that, people just babbled on like Santos does. All right? And so people begin to tell their stories that way. Okay? And one of the things, amongst all of the ruins that we have found in random places, there's always an amphitheater. Always. Okay? Sometimes even without the city, there's just like an amphitheater built. Because that is how big of an influence Greek drama then has on all of the local cultures. All right? We'll continue talking about this on We'll continue talking about this on Wednesday.